This is AUGforums.com Real Talk, an unfiltered, independent perspective on Acumatica Cloud ERP. My name is Tim Rodman, and I want to mention three things in this pre-recorded intro before we get started. First, thank you to our sponsors. Our first sponsor is Repay. Repay offers omni-channel integrated payment solutions for Acumatica users. Whether you are making B2B payments or collecting them, Repay is your full-service payments provider. Power up your payments to empower your business and accelerate the AP and AR payment flow through one seamless integration. Our second sponsor is DataSelf. DataSelf Analytics is a revolutionary reporting solution that enables organizations to make the most informed decisions faster and easier than ever. It uniquely simplifies business intelligence, empowers anyone to build and access dashboards, and delivers critical business insight when and where you need it. Our third sponsor is Velixo. Velixo is an award-winning provider of Excel-based reporting solutions for Acumatica. With Velixo, you can build financial, project, and other business reports in Excel with live Acumatica data in just a few minutes and get the answers you need. If you know Excel, you can do it. Please take a minute to support this podcast by clicking each one of the sponsor banners located at augforums.com/sponsors. Our sponsors track clicks, and every click helps to support this podcast. The second thing I'd like to mention is that I'm always looking for victims. Guests. If you use Acumatica in any capacity, no matter how small, I'd love to talk with you. Check out augforums.com/podcast and click the link near the top of the page to learn more about being a guest on the podcast. Third and finally, I'd love to see you listed on my Rolodex. Check out augforums.com/Rolodex to find out who else is using Acumatica and read the instructions at the top to see how you can add yourself to the list. All right, that's it for the pre-recorded intro. Let's get started. Today is Thursday, May 26th, 2022, and this is episode number 86. CJ Boguszewski, VP Partner Programs and Strategy at Acumatica. CJ, thanks for making your last name sound a lot easier than it looks. I almost wanted to call you Mike C. You know, if you see Mike's last name, that one's really scary, but yours isn't too bad. So thanks for going easy on me.
I really appreciate that. And I can absolutely appreciate what you just said, because last week I was actually in the same room as Mike. And I always describe my last name as the ultimate challenge to defeat in a Scrabble game, right? But then, before apologizing for what I was about to do, I tried to pronounce his last name in front of a group of people and declared him the new Scrabble champion. So yes. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Well, hey, thanks for coming on. And, maybe we could just start off. I was starting off with the brief origin story of all of our guests. So maybe you can tell us where you grew up, where you went to college, and what that first job out of college looked like for you.
Sure. So back in the Mesozoic period, I was living in the state of New Jersey quite peacefully and grew up in the southern part where everybody's a Philadelphia fan. So I'm an Eagles, Flyers, Phillies, and Sixers fan, but actually went to high school up in the part of the state where my parents are from, in Jersey City, a place called St. Peter's Prep. Just outside of New York City. I had the great good fortune of being the first person in my family to go to college and managed to make my way to upstate New York to Cornell for my undergrad. I studied political science and I studied French as part of my undergraduate degree. Then I spent 5 years putting that to good use as a coder, which of course is what you do with a degree like that, isn't it? And learned how to code on the Microsoft technologies that were emerging at the time. And this will give you a hint as to how long ago this was, when we were moving people off of mainframes and onto what we used to call client server with Microsoft NT and SQL Server 6 and VB3 16-bit and building 28.8 modem handshakes. And let me stop there. I survived that. Only the strong survive, which is, again, New Jersey state motto, I think. And we arrived at a place where I had worked for 5 years and really didn't know that much about business. And so what I decided was, at that point, an MBA would be a good idea. And
Can I ask you on that coding part? So was it for Microsoft or for like a consulting company or
no, it was a
in-house?
consulting firm, a
Okay.
company called Financial Dynamics back in the day. And we took it from 30 to 300 people in about 2.5 years and successfully
Okay.
sold it to a much bigger partner in the space. I used the proceeds for that very wisely instead of investing in real estate, because that never goes anywhere, into getting an MBA. Let's not talk about ROIs on this, however. So I took my.
Wait. I also got to ask you on that. What was it? ERP-ish? Like, was it business systems that it was? I mean, when you say database, it sounds like it potentially could have been.
Yeah, so we did the main project that I built up over time and became the lead architect for was a recurrent billing interface system for a small financial company called American Express. So at that time, they really wanted people to be able to earn membership rewards points on
Okay.
recurring charges. And so we actually built the what became the SNA server basis for building the tunnel between the modem on the client site where their member records were stored and feeding that into the mainframe of American Express. So you can
Okay.
imagine the delight and the technical complexities of working with COBOL and all kinds of other fun technologies that I shall leave nameless at this point.
Well, no,
But
it's cool. I
they're
was
not
like,
technically ERP, right? But kind of in
but
the
you're
zone.
close. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was early on in your career. I was like finding out, some people kind of, at least for me, I just sort of discovered ERP. It wasn't something I knew about in school. You just sort of fall into it. Sounds like you
Mhm.
sort of fell into business systems at least pretty early on. That's
I
interesting.
did. I did. And we'll come back to falling into stuff later, because I decided to start my MBA in the fall of 1999. I took it outside of the US in the UK, a place called London Business School. Pretty good place to go to school. Really enjoyed my time there. And I had the pleasure of getting several offers in the second part of my second year, which was in about January of 2001. Now, again, here I am dating myself. What happened in 2001 that we can remember? Oh yeah, .com burst, right? So all of the offers I had came down to one, and this goes back to kind of the origin story around ERP. The one that stuck and the one that I took was a company called Siebel. So you might have heard of Siebel. It's in the CRM space, or it was at the time. There was a merger between two companies, Siebel and another one called Scopus, where they put together Salesforce automation alongside customer management into this package that eventually turned into something that Oracle got really interested in and bought. So for me, that was an interesting sort of introduction, if you like, to not necessarily ERP, but certainly CRM is a piece of ERP that oftentimes you'll hear publishers talk about, including present company. But
Was
once
that
you
a
get beyond,
mid-market product or more of a tier one type of product?
more of a tier one, definitely enterprise, very, very big customers were on the platform. And in the end, when it was subsumed by Oracle, it really did perform very, very well and form the basis of their CRM offering in the market today. But the interesting part for me was I was really kind of focused in some vertical markets, communications, media, and energy being the breadth of the vertical markets, and then specifically really in the energy space. So I actually, after that, joined a company that built customer information systems, which, if you can imagine, billing components and rate determinants for energy companies being kind of on the further back end of an ERP type of implementation, right? So if you're looking at ERP and the functionality of the chart of accounts and the general ledger, this is the stuff that produces the invoicing and the billing that goes into that. And having worked in that for a while, sometimes I hear people talk about ERP being, a swap out of a patient's heart as they continue walking down the hall. Well, no, actually, that's a CIS, because believe me, if you start screwing up bills, the business is going to go down fast, right? So
Sure,
I had
sure.
that experience as well. Again, the great good fortune, and this is another theme that we're going to come into here, getting bought by Oracle. Surprise. And so, yeah, that really forms kind of the basis of if you look at my kind of mid background in ERP or enterprise software. And I was really in that point in my career using what I had learned in coding and the MBA program to be in product management, which is kind of a good combination of those skill sets. So leading product lines in those companies kind of throughout that portion of my career. And with that product mindset and that coding background, I then came to the third part of my career, which is really around ecosystems and business development and figuring out ways to start delivering revenue and interesting growth opportunities to companies that I worked for. So
I'm scrolling through your LinkedIn profile. Give me a year now when you're going
yeah,
into the
so
third stage.
like when I started my job at Silver Spring Networks, which was a pre-IPO company here in California where I live, that was a company that was, yeah, if you have a meter on the side of your house, it probably has Silver Spring Communications inside it. And I really worked in two roles there. One was on that metering product and delivering that to both investor-owned utilities in the US, as well as the international expansion strategy. So necessitating a huge set of partners to deliver an end-to-end solution to utilities in various geographies. And then after the IPO, my CEO kind of patted me on the back and said, "You did a great job, CJ, growing that line of business. What I really need now is somebody to tell me what this Internet of Things thing that I keep hearing about from the analysts is, and whether or not we can do something about it." And so with the entrepreneur in residence from that time, we put together a plan to go after a new market segment, which is smart cities and smart lighting. Interesting business as well. Again, a completely new partner ecosystem, a completely new set of dynamics, and a channel-driven product that we put into the market that actually got very good traction. And having spent kind of 4 years there, I decided to do something a little bit more entrepreneurial in terms of seeing whether I could have the desired effect in some various business environments that I was in. So tried one with the largest utility in Europe, 23 million ratepayers, took that smart city and lighting idea to them internally to put into their kind of Horizon 1, 2, 3 framework to deliver a product into their existing sales forces where they had municipal contracts and be able to deliver sort of add-on revenue to their business. Then I came across a Japanese startup. I was employee number 2 in the Americas, kind of ex-AWS guys in the IoT space, looking at building a partner ecosystem to deliver their IoT platform into, which they could then sort of, if you like, ISV around and put into the market here in the US. Spent about a year and a half doing that. And then moved on to a company which everybody probably has heard of in the news last couple of years called ARM. ARM was an interesting experience in the sense that it's a semiconductor company and not really a tech company in the truest sense. It licenses its IP to many providers, but what it decided to do was diversify away from that and build different products based on their technology internally and put partner ecosystems around that to deliver new sources of revenue. Then, of course, everybody read about what happened between SoftBank, NVIDIA, and the others. And so that didn't really necessarily go exactly where we wanted it to go. It's still kind of working its way through the worm, as it were. But at that point, I decided to take those skills that I've just been talking about and put them to play here in the ERP space in Acumatica. So that's kind of the long backstory, and hopefully I didn't catch anybody drooling on their pillow yet.
No, I love it. I love hearing the background of each person. I think it's interesting. So Silver Springs, basically you've been with partner ecosystems since about 2010. That's been your focus. But Silver Springs wasn't really software. It's more of a hardware ecosystem, right?
You know, it's a full stack of hardware, firmware, software, and services that was used. So, you know, depending on the market configuration, for example, there are some markets where the industry is completely deregulated, and we used in-market players to put the solution through the go-to-market motion, and then other markets where we actually delivered a vast majority of that directly.
I think it's cool because I think it's kind of refreshing that, you know, you're with partner ecosystems, but it's not all software. So like we had John Howell on this podcast. He's one of the 3 original co-founders of Acumatica, and he was talking about how in the 1980s, you know, before it really existed for ERP systems, he kind of borrowed the idea from the pharmaceutical industry. So, and I didn't realize that, you know, that that's where it came from for mid-market ERP. So I kind of like that, you know, it's not just this kind of narrow ERP specific background that you have. You've got that, it's kind of interwoven, but then you've got these different refreshing partner ecosystem experiences. And, you know, what attracted you about Acumatica? What made it interesting to come and work there?
Yeah, and it goes back to a little bit of what you're talking about there in terms of fresh perspective and openness as well. One of the things that I can note as I've walked through the door over the last several weeks is Acumatica makes itself very much oriented towards its ecosystem, right? With no direct sales force and a commitment from us to not really have one, you really have to put everything you do through the lens of the partner ecosystem. And when you make yourself customer first on top of that, that creates an interesting dynamic, you know, between yourself and the partner ecosystem in terms of the kinds of conversations you want to have to be able to drive growth in your business and also have a healthy ecosystem who's actually serving the customers. So for me, that sort of orientation is one of the main reasons that I was attracted to the company, because I am a big believer that, it's not just IoT like I was talking about, where a team sport is essential to win. I actually believe that's true in software more generally. I find that a vertically integrated direct go-to-market play is far less interesting to work in, just simply because there are fewer sort of challenges to work through. And, if you want something much more formulaic, maybe that's for you. But I think you can probably tell after 10 minutes of talking to me, that's not really my personality type, right? I like lots of different personalities. I'm a social and outgoing person. I think working with a partner ecosystem that's vibrant and energetic is one of the most stimulating things I can choose to do as a professional. And so that was really an attraction piece. And then when you think about what the business is trying to do and how it's trying to differentiate itself in this kind of group of four competitive dynamic, you end up thinking about things like, oh, well, a connected business is actually a really important differentiator. And when you think about a connected business, you need people who are oriented towards connecting, and that sort of fits my personality. Or the fact that you want to think about how you can future-proof that investment that customers are going to be making into your published platform. Well, it turns out that I really think a lot about the future, and I really think a lot about what it is that in a space like this, it means to be differentiated on a future-proof kind of an attribute, right? So those things are really attractive. And then last but not least, I think, when I look at what Acumatica has, several, let's call it 7,500 customers, 350 partners, it's a really nice size to be able to come in and have a good amount of gravity in the market. We might be young and scrappy and up and coming, but we certainly have enough presence that we're not a new kid on the block, right? So I think those three things would be what I would point to as attractive qualities as I was standing on the outside as a candidate.
So I gotta ask you, one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on, and by the way, thank you for coming on. With the new CEO, we got John Case now taking over the helm here. You come in kind of right on, I don't know if you call it coattails, but you're sort of part of the new regime.
Yeah. We didn't know each other, by the way. We didn't know each other.
Okay. I was wondering. But I'm sure maybe you can answer this. I'm sure he influenced maybe who they were looking for in filling that role. Is that fair to say?
That's fair to say. Absolutely. I met him certainly before I signed the papers. Yes.
You're part of the new team, right? And the new, what does John Case look at, and shaping the future of Acumatica. And so, you slipped it in there at one point, but I got to press you on it kind of on behalf of all Acumatica partners everywhere. And the first, I hear you got some Oracle in your background, which
Sure.
sounds a little scary. Oracle they like to implement directly with NetSuite. Is there anything on the horizon with Acumatica where we might see Acumatica doing their own implementations? What do you think?
Yeah, we are, there are no business model changes that are in the plan. I can tell you that. That was a conversation that I had on the way in terms of a commitment to the channel, because I think there's a significant amount of value in the way that we currently do business today. And like I was saying earlier, one of the things that really attracted me to the place was the fact that, our success only comes through the channel and making it work better and faster for both us and the partners. If you have that sort of channel conflict, where you could snatch deals away from them or do direct business, I think you're creating a lot of sort of unnecessary barriers to getting business done with your ecosystem, because they're always kind of in the back of their mind having a few ancillary thoughts, as it were. And not to denigrate how other partners or other competitors would necessarily deal with their partners, is the way I should say it. But I do think this clean and pure model is something that we're doubling down on. And all of the orientation that I have in terms of walking through the door and setting up how I want to run the partner programs and strategy piece of the business is with that in mind.
I've never heard it described that way, as the clean and pure model. That's interesting. Yeah. I mean, it's simple in a sense that's the only way you're doing it. And I also like the point you made that I didn't realize that was a point for you coming in the door before you came in the door. So it's almost like you're in the same position as Acumatica Partners. That was sort of something important to you coming into it. same thing for Acumatica partners. That's important to them in that relationship. So that's great. You're on their side in a sense, in that
I hope to
viewpoint.
become eventually, when I'm articulate, their biggest advocate. But yeah, maybe I already am. But the point is, like, think about, for example, like, okay, not every customer is happy with their partner. That's just the reality of life in any publisher ecosystem where partners own the customer. Sometimes they want to change. Well, one of the things we want to do is protect partners and hope to mitigate some of the effects of poaching or unhappy customers. So what we do when there's a partner of record of change, we disincentivize the partners going out and looking for unhappy customers in other partners' bases. So if you can imagine, if your margin's restricted for that first year on customers that you're acquiring when there's been a partner of record change, that kind of says to you, well, it isn't really worth it to go and poach these customers, right? Those are the kinds of things where we can pull different levers and turn different dials in the program to really orient towards, making the customer experience a good one, and also trying to minimize some of the downsides that having a pure partner model has, right? And there are other examples too, but that one top of mind is really interesting, I think, to make sure that people understand. We run the program in a way where we try to minimize things like big partners poaching from little ones, partner changes being a way to, grow your customer base as a partner by taking away from others. Because in the end, Acumatica is customer first, right? So we really want that experience to be the best it can be. And we want to do everything we can in terms of incentives for the partners to be able to say, right, they are not encouraging us to do anything other than go find net news, right?
Oh, that's cool. And I want to hear some more levers and dials that, are bouncing around your brain, that may happen, may not. But before we do, I just want to underscore something you said there about I forget if you even used the word. I think you said no business model changes or no significant business model changes. That I think you're echoing something from a John Case article, which I'll link to on this episode. He said a very similar phrase, something about we're not changing the model, we're just scaling it up essentially. Does that sound about right?
That's right. We're really looking for ways to improve and ultimately optimize that in order to maximize the revenue for the partners and also get Acumatica on the growth path that we think a product that we have deserves. Right?
So with that mindset, wanting to scale that up, actually, also before we get into levers and dials on your list, one thing on my list was how do you scale up now? If I go look at the Bob Scott Insights list of top 100 VARs in the US that are ranked by revenue and in the mid-market, outside of that, is there any new ideas you go after, or is it just going after that type of a list? How do you grow that partner base?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and something that we will continue to engage in wrestling matches. The business model that we have had over time has been a lot of local expert partners trained by us who we don't compete with. And I think that as you start to look at the larger firms, so you alluded to Bob Scott's list, or let's say the top 300 CPAs or the next 100 list, there are a number of these lists where you kind of look at these partners who are bigger and you say, that's kind of interesting because they have much more reach into a significant number of markets and could potentially deliver you reliable, scalable, and repeatable opportunities in a way that the smaller local partners can't, right? And when I look at it, somebody like CBiz, somebody like Markham, somebody like MNP, these are customers. We already have 4 of the top 10. So it's not like we're not in that space. And I do think that over time, that will be something that we pay attention to. How can we actually put them into our ecosystem and get them to understand that we might be a lower risk publisher to carry than perhaps some of the others that they have encountered in the past, and explain the benefits of our partner first business model to them. So I think that is definitely one way. And I think there's another way, which is we really do look for those young and scrappy and hungry partners who have the potential to grow quickly. If you're born in the cloud the way we were, and these young and scrappy partners have only ever known the cloud, I think that combination of a lack of, if you like, heavy code-based legacy and young and scrappies picking up the published software and bringing it to the markets that we otherwise couldn't find is an interesting value proposition for end customers one that they might not have been receptive to before from perhaps some of the other combinations of publisher plus partner who have tried to touch them in this market before. So I think those are two where I'd highlight that we really do put a significant amount of focus of the program into.
I got to add on your young and scrappy line there.
Mm-hmm.
The previous episode is actually Scott from Tuxton, which I thought was a pretty novel idea there. You got a VAR now who's wholly owned subsidiary of an Acumatica customer. I think that's interesting. But then also to your point, you've got the traditional players that are on that list that you keep attacking. Any other like unredacted novel ideas of ways to grow the channel?
Well, look, I mean, think about the market for a second, and I do this sometimes. There's a QuickBooks Excel end of the world where you probably have less than 5 million in revenue a year in your business, and it's probably adequate to run your business on something like that. And then you have the, oh my God, we need SAP or we're going to die end of the market because it's $1 billion plus ARR, and it's a level of complexity that you just cannot possibly manage any other way. In between is where we live. But what I'll say is, as you look at how the economy grows and changes, these guys who live at the lower end are an interesting set of potential customers for us. And so we're always trying to solve for, well, how do we reach that, if you like, ocean of small businesses who are showing good growth signs and about to run into the kind of complexity that our product can help to mitigate. And that's an interesting place for us to talk about, especially when you look at, we really do have sort of a verticalized approach, if you will, with the construction and the manufacturing in it. And especially I want to highlight the retail commerce piece, because that's the ones who are small and grow quick and the complexity gets a little bit past them. They might be used to the land of digital agencies where they've got a stack of, it used to be Marketo, but it's somebody like BigCommerce or, a list of e-commerce platform providers that they work with. They don't necessarily have good visibility as digital agencies into the ERP world. Is there some kind of combination play you can put in there that allows for a smooth glide path up to the mid-market for these quick growing companies, right? So we think about those things as well.
So that kind of, the way you're describing that is underscoring your customer first points, and that you're thinking about the customer, and then that might lead you into new ways of bringing partners into the channel because you're going after customers that maybe weren't served so much by a traditional mid-market VAR. Does that sound fair to say?
It does, yeah. Or saying it the way that my mom might have said it. We're not trying to hog tie anybody. We're trying to get them to use their wings.
I like that. Well, that's cool. So ways of growing the channel. I mean, Acumatica is at a point now, still scrappy, but not as, John Roskell years ago described Acumatica as the teenager in the room. I don't know that you call it a teenager anymore. It's sort of come of age.
I wish I were, but I'm not.
No, I mean Acumatica. It's not the upstart. It's recognized now, right? They don't have to jump up and down for attention. Now it's about scaling it. Now it's about dollars, right? And then seeing the revenue grow, profitability, and all that. So, what about the dials side of the thing?
Well, and you make an interesting point there, which is, we're big enough, but if you think about let's just call it the philosophy of Bothism in marketing, right? So you want both short-term and long-term marketing to be able to change the trend line of how your business grows. So think of it like this, right? I think the best way to think of it is, brand is the protein, sales are the workout, right? So the way to get yourself into optimal shape is to have both of those, not necessarily on a balance, but as the yin and the yang, right? And for us, the really important thing is now our brand isn't so much of a secret anymore. So, as we hit the gas pedal and sales go up through our partner ecosystem, we also want marketing to be able to deliver a different kind of a trend line. And so what I would say is, yes, Acumatica is probably more known in the spaces where it is, but we think that a lot of the exciting elements that we have in our marketing and with our partners to help them with their marketing has the opportunity to really change the trend line as well. So I just want to, make a fine.
I never heard that. Say that point again. The protein. Say it again.
Look, I'm not saying I want to be Arnold Schwarzenegger, but if I wanted to be, I'd need both protein and workouts, right? So the brand is the protein. You got to eat right. You got to live the right way. And sales is the workouts. That's the thing that actually carries your revenue up. But your revenue will keep bouncing along the same trend line if you don't have enough protein, right? I'll never be Schwarzenegger unless I do both.
Interesting. Now, what you didn't say there is product. So like, and you might not have the visibility onto this, and this might be something that I have to cut out of the episode, which, by the way, I have to mention, I did agree that, to get let this episode get run past other people at Acumatica before I publish. So just putting that disclaimer out there. But on the product side, Acumatica traditionally has been like a 80 plus or 70 plus percent spent on the product. Now that you're into scale mode, do you think we start to see more investment in the sales and marketing areas that you're talking about?
It's a good question. I think, as you point out, it has to do with company evolution and stages. I think the commitment to R&D is strong. I can tell you, walking in, that I kind of looked at it and went, wow, you guys really spend a lot of money on this stuff. I can't, that's a lot of technology resources that we have to build this product for a company this size. So I think that speaks to exactly the point you were making, which is a lot of the money goes back into R&D. But the other thing that I will say is I don't really see that necessarily changing. Maybe as we get bigger, it is less of a proportion, but in absolute dollar terms, I don't really see much of a budgeted change downward for any particular reason. I just don't know that we'll keep the same trend line upward as we increase in revenue. So I hope that makes sense as an answer.
Yeah, and I won't hold you to that, but that would make sense, right? I think that's the natural evolution of a software company. Sure. And to your point about you're surprised by the product investment. You're already in the room with Mike C, right? I mean, it's still a technology company, geeky company, as I like to describe it. And that's traditionally been a selling point, I think. It sells very well to the CTO type. I'm curious from your side, from growing the channel, is that something that you feel like partners should be continuing to emphasize, or is it a different selling strategy as you're trying to ramp up in a bigger way?
It's a great question. I do think that there is a certain amount of emphasis we can put on the investment in the technology, and if you like, the differentiation that offers, whether that be talking about the easy extensibility through the XRP platform that we sometimes have talked about, and something that I continue to learn about, whether that be through leveraging what we have on the marketplace in terms of the ISB offerings that complement what we provide as a sort of base product. But ultimately, I also look at the roadmap too, and the roadmap gives me a lot of heart because, one of the things that I will say in my initial time here is that there could be improvements in things like UI UX. There could be improvements, in long-standing code issues that need to be sort of untangled in a systemic way. And I do see those investments on the roadmap over the course of the next 2 years. So I see us not shying away from solving the problems that I think give customers a little bit of trouble over time and ultimately create a little bit of an issue for partners to overcome as they're talking in competitive situations. I think you're going to see significant improvements in certain areas like those, where we will continue to improve and hopefully not just maintain, but maybe grow a little bit of advantage when it comes to talking about the product in those situations for the partners, right?
Yeah, maybe it gets summarized in the sales cycle under the one bullet point that's future proof. I mean, another one that I think people love is the whole .NET Core thing. That's a beast to tackle. And, I don't know companies other than Acumatica that try to do such a major revamp, but that's the kind of stuff that they are willing to tackle, right? And that's all part of that future-proof mentality, I think.
Right. It's I'm not saying we're taking the house down to stud, but we're certainly rewiring, and we're certainly replastering, and we're certainly repainting, right? And look, the name of the game, I think I alluded to this earlier, the name of the game is teamwork. So the idea that you can have rapid integrations on a modern code base to minimize things like attack vectors on the cybersecurity front, or incorporate new and innovative products who also adhere to the .NET framework, or extend the XRP platform in a way that makes sense for your business. I don't have to be the one to tell your audience that things like containerization and serverless and infrastructure as code and CI/CD are the way that the world is moving as cloud becomes more and more and more of a penetrative force into the technology stacks that exist out there in the world. And Acumatica has to be able to not continue to surf the wave that it caught 12 years ago, but catch the next one and the next one after that. Because I think we talked about it in the beginning, even though CIS is really the open heart surgery while the patient walks down the hall, ERP is pretty close. You don't really want to be forcing companies to switch out their platform all that often. So you have to be able to keep up with the technology and offer them a way to sort of elegantly continue to move to the latest version to be able to get all the benefits and reduce some of those longer term risks of an aging code base.
I like that catch the next wave analogy. I mean, I usually describe it as put out to pasture. The 1980s products, you know, they grow to a certain point and then you put them out to maintenance mode pasture. But I like the next wave analogy better because it's like the legacy products rode the wave in to shore, got on the beach, and then just started sun tanning in maintenance mode. But I like the idea you swim back out and you catch the next wave. I like that analogy. It's a good one.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you're going to have business resilience, it's more than no-cost web services and APIs, which we provide also, by the way. It's much more about making sure you're standing on solid ground. How many times have you seen companies held to ransom for cybersecurity problems over things that they didn't even know were in their infrastructure, right? That's because they've got servers that are sitting there aging out that they don't necessarily keep up with in terms of patches. IT has a limited budget and has to reprioritize. Next thing you know, you've got the DDoS attack and you're paying $5 million to somebody offshore to get your stuff back. Like that's the kind of stuff that you have to really, really think about with these older systems, right? You can say that they're hived off behind your walls, but that's not ever actually the case. We all know that.
So you've checked my box that CJ still fits what I view as the geek culture at Acumatica. I like that. What about gears? So partner
I don't
program.
even have to talk about the IEEE standards that I know. That's good. We're good.
What about the gears? So partner program gears, you know, whatever you can share, you know, if I'm an Acumatica partner, maybe I'm nervous about margins decreasing, things like that, or, you know, just other type of gears that potentially could be in the works, you know, ideas that you have for tweaking the program, anything you can share with us there.
Yeah. So we really, you know, in terms of how we and let's talk about the existing partners first. I think that's probably a useful place to go. I think that, you know, over time, we want to be able to drive certain behaviors from our partners. So obviously, we want them to market their business and find net new implementations. We have a certain set of parameters around how we pay margin on that. We also want them to serve their existing customers well. And I alluded to it there in terms of we provide the technology basis for them to continue to go back to their existing customers and address new needs or help them with the evolution of their business through the technology that we offer. So that idea of expanding the contract through add-ons and modules or other services is another piece of the puzzle where we continue to try to encourage partners in terms of margin to put some effort in. And then, of course,
can I ask you on that real quick?
Yeah,
so
sure.
I'm way out of date on the actual partner program, but refresh my memory. Is it the same? You know, it's a subscription now, right? So it's SaaS. It used to be that you sold a beast and then it was a smaller maintenance fee, right? So there was a bigger margin up front and a lower margin on a recurring basis. Is it still the same margin since it's just a SaaS product for the initial sale versus the year after year sale?
Yeah, but the beauty of it is it's billed annually and upfront. We give you the credit for the margin. And so, you know, if you think of it in those terms, it really does help you in terms like think about the old way where you sold the monster and then you had to live with it for 10 years. You know, it was really hard to do things like plan for staff because you didn't know necessarily when the monsters would come in. And so you had this kind of difficulty in building the capabilities in your business, whereas SaaS, billed annually, paid up front, gives you that opportunity to plan and grow your business with, going back to my Arnold analogy, a certain amount of protein that's going to be injected on a reliable and predictable way. So yes, our margin is really oriented towards that subscription model where, you know, net new is a certain one that we will offer you margin on and continue to pay over time. Contract expansion is another one we'll continue to pay you over time. And ultimately, you know, because there's never a threat of us snatching the lead away from you and selling it ourselves, right? And us paying probably what I would consider the most generous margins of all the publishers in the industry. There's real encouragement there for partners to really work through the issues and use all the support that Acumatica offers to be able to go ahead and address those markets.
So I'm more incentivized to continue to serve my customer. And that kind of goes to the poaching thing, right? An existing Acumatica client is just as attractive to me margin wise as a brand new Acumatica client.
And even more, because if you poach somebody, I'm not going to pay you the first year that you have them, right? So there's that too. But even like CSAT, customer satisfaction is really important. I told you I'm customer first. Make sure they're happy. If they're not happy, I'm going to penalize you. And we're going to have that conversation quarter by quarter on the subscription customers that you have. So ultimately, there is an encouragement there as the third leg of the stool, which is we want the customer happy. We want you to continue to help them and sell to them. And we want you to go get net news, right?
So that all sounds like the way the program has been. Any other like tweaks that you can maybe give us a heads up on, that might be coming down the pipe?
Yeah, it's a good question, and certainly as I've come in, I'm in my 8th week, so we're still doing a little bit.
I forgot it was that early.
Yeah, I mean, yes, it's a fair question to ask. No, I'm not ready to tell you what it is yet, and certainly in the coming weeks and months, we'll be talking about potential revisions to make the program better both for partners and ultimately for customers.
Okay, no problem. But yeah, no substantial business model changes. It's scaling up is kind of this is growth time for Acumatica, even more so than it's been, is the idea, I think.
Yes, that's correct.
That's cool. Well, great. I mean, I mainly wanted to have you on to hear that, right? I mean, it's one thing to read press releases, another thing to hear it directly, and it's great. It's great assurance that we've got still a strong product with a strong leadership and still the channel mindset. I think just the way Acumatica has been going, that's what I want, at least. I don't want big changes. I want just keep going in the direction you're going in, and that's what I'm hearing from you, which is good. It makes me feel good, like I'm in the right place.
Well, I'm delighted to offer you that. but ultimately, it is a great team. You may see on the outside me coming in, John coming in, other changes happening, but ultimately, I think the mission remains the same. And I think when you think about Acumatica and its brand and the purpose that it has, it's really oriented towards having a customer experience that delights the customer and attracts the best partners to serve those customers with a product that stands on solid foundations. And boy, what a pleasure it is to walk into that.
Well, that's cool. Can I ask you on the partner channel side?
Yeah.
How much is IFS a part of your role, in the sense that, and I'm 3 years out of date on this. When I saw the acquisition in 2019,
right,
what the news articles I was reading is IFS, in my words, put kind of an upper bound on Acumatica in terms of market, like company size that they would go after, which I liked, because I liked the idea that you wouldn't have necessarily another NetSuite that just keeps chasing bigger and bigger and bigger customers. You got a product that is happy to sit in the mid-market with an IFS that you go to for bigger companies. From a partner channel standpoint, how much is that on your radar, where you maybe look for partners who would do both, or you look to recruit IFS partners for Acumatica, or vice versa? Is that, is that even on your radar at this point, I guess is the question.
Yeah, I would put that kind of further down the priority list as I walk through the door. I think it's a good point to make. And I alluded to the fact that, SAP is at the very high end of that scale. IFS, of course, being a tier 1 provider as well. I didn't want to necessarily show the EQT stuff here, but here I am. IFS is definitely a good competitor to SAP. And ultimately, yeah, when our customers get big enough and start bumping up against that, that would be an interesting conversation to have. But walking through the door right now, I would say it's a lower priority thing for us to think about and consider.
That makes sense. Yeah, it's grow the Acumatica business. That's
absolutely
what you're there for, through the partner channel.
Yeah, I think that's right. And ultimately, any growth is probably growth that we're going to take a good hard look at and consider. So sure, yes.
Any other parting thoughts you want to leave the Acumatica partner channel with?
No, I'm just looking forward to over time meet all of you, talk to you face to face, talk about why the Phillies are going to win the World Series next year, whatever it is that you want to talk about. I'd be delighted. Even though I live in San Francisco, I still wear my red hat with a P on it. So
that's awesome. That's awesome. So you're in San Francisco, and let's see. You're, I'm trying to think. Is there even going to be an Acumatica office, you think, in that area? There's not currently,
No,
right?
I'm headquarters up in Kirkland, but strangely, they can't convince me to leave San Francisco yet. But we
Not yet.
continue to have Kirkland, Columbus, and Reston, Virginia, which is kind of DC, right? That's the three. And then in Canada, we have Montreal and Toronto.
Okay. Well, cool. Well, hey, CJ, thanks for taking the time. Thanks for being willing to talk to a guy like me who could ask you anything.
Anytime.
And doubling down on the partner first business model, and also the transparent culture that Acumatica has, and the geeky culture. I think you've checked a lot of boxes for me, and makes me feel good.
Cool. Well, I'm glad to be of help, and pleasure to spend the time, but I got to get back to my macros. No, I'm just kidding.
A fellow geek appreciates that.
Absolutely. All right, Tim, nice meeting you too. And take care. And to everyone who had the patience to listen, you have my sympathy, but thank you very much.
All right. Well, that's it for now. We'll catch you on the next episode of AUGforums.com Real Talk. Thanks for listening, and take care.